We are delighted to have you join us for this seminar on collaboratively delivering soybean best management practices, specifically for soybean planting. My name is Rachel Vann, and I am the Soybean Extension Specialist at NC State University. And I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Shawn Conley, the Soybean and Small Grain Extension Specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Dr. Lindsey, the Soybean and Small Grain Extension Specialist at The Ohio State University. In our presentation today, we're going to cover several topics. One is to introduce our Science for Success team, talk about some important planting decisions and some early season soybean considerations and misconceptions based on material that's been developed by our Science for Success team. And then finally, we'll talk about a national trial example focused on biological seed treatments, which is an example of the collaborative research that our team hosts annually. So what is Science for Success? Science for Success is a group of soybean extension specialists at land grant institutions from across the United States who collaboratively deliver soybean best management practices to farmers at the local level, at the regional level, and at the national level. And we do this through several mechanisms. We summarize existing and ongoing QSSB-supported checkoff research. Our team is very active in checkoff-supported research projects at the local level, and we can utilize that knowledge to amplify our project into national extension impact. We also collaborate on national research trials, and this allows us to capture many environments of data in 1 to 2 years, and we'll discuss that more about that later in the presentation. And through summarizing existing and ongoing QSSB supported projects and collaborating on these national research trials, it again really allows us to amplify our state level and regional level research and extension knowledge into national extension impact. So we'd like to provide some examples of the ways that we've been achieving the goal of providing soybean best management practices for growers across the U.S. And the first that we'll highlight is in that bucket of summarizing existing and ongoing QSSB supported soybean research. So our team had a lot of institutional knowledge about the soybean growth cycle and important risks, misconceptions, and management decisions that need to be made across these different soybean growth stages. And recently we took all that knowledge, some of it's based on field experience, much of it is based on previously collected data, and we summarized it into an extension publication that discusses the important management considerations, risks, and misconceptions across diverse growth stages. You can find that publication available at this QR code, and we'll also reference it at later points in this presentation. Here's an example of collaborating on a national research trial that the team has been active in over the past couple of years. This particular project focused on foliar fertilizers and investigating them and their use at early pod development and soybean production systems across the United States. And what was unique about this project was instead of evaluating these products at 3 or 4 sites locally, we were able to evaluate them at 46 sites across the US, which allowed us to capture very wide diversity in environmental conditions and yield environments in a short period of time. This publication is available at this QR code, and one of the real successes of the Science for Success team is that the graduate student who was leading this project has now gone on to be a faculty member who contributes to the Science for Success team. We have had other national research topics that we've focused on that have included nitrogen and sulfur fertilization at planting. We've had a collaborative soil health project, nitrogen fixation project under various fertilizer regimes, and you'll hear in a few moments about a national biological seed treatment trial. And the goal of our team is to use grower feedback that we get both on the local and national level to drive the national research topics that we address annually. Our Science for Success team strives to use diversified outreach strategies to get our developed information out to growers and other agricultural stakeholders. We post our information on the Soybean Research and Information Network website, and we also utilize our local extension channels to get this information out. We have done things like webinars centered around the extension publications we've developed, and also generally have a YouTube video that accompanies the various topics that we focus on annually. We also recently started a Twitter feed and would encourage the followers of this webinar to follow us on Twitter. We post our updated resources. We also are active in posting updates from the field from around the United States to see what crop status and environmental conditions, pest pressure differences are as we move across soybean production in the US. If we think back to one of the ways we accomplished our goal, which was leveraging previously conducted QSSB research to develop materials, we recently focused on developing publications that focused on soybean planting considerations. We had the best soybean planting date. We had a publication that focused on soybean row spacing and a publication that focused on soybean plant population density. And today, as we get thinking about planting soybeans in 2023, we wanted to revisit some of these important soybean planting considerations. So at this time, I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Shawn Conley, to again give an example of how we leverage ongoing QSSB or regionally supported soybean checkoff to amplify the goals of Science for Success.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Vann. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Shawn Conley. I'm the State Soybean Specialist at University of Wisconsin-Madison. What I want to do is kind of walk us back and look at how we've really focused some of our research on refining our soybean planting dates. So roughly about 8 years ago, we received funding from the North Central Soybean Research Program to do some survey data from across the North Central region, which encompasses roughly 80% of US soybean production. Now, if we look here at one of these red dots, we're able to collect over 8,000 surveys from farmers on over 600,000 acres of soybean production across this North Central region. So from that, we were able to gather and glean some information and really focus in on when the optimal soybean planting dates are. And we saw anywhere from North Dakota all the way down into Ohio, anywhere from a 0 or 0.2 bushel per acre per day yield increase, all the way up to a 0.5 bushel per acre yield increase, starting roughly around that April 20th timeframe. So again, it gives a good sense of some on-farm data. We're really trying to push this soybean planting date idea and increase soybean yield. Now, within each state then, we kind of went through and looked at some of our historical yield data from our within state production areas. And we see anywhere from North Dakota saw roughly a 23% yield difference between planting on May 1 to May 30th. All the way when we get down to where Dr. Vann is in North Carolina, a 4.2% yield decrease. So again, we see a lot of variability across the nation in terms of what role soybean planting date has in terms of increasing soybean yield. So where does this free yield really happen? First of all, we tend to see more vegetative growth when we're able to go in and plant early. We also see quicker canopy closure. And by quicker canopy closure, I mean based on the relative growth stage. So we're really trying to maximize soybean yield. We're trying to get that full canopy closed right around somewhere, depending on where you in the country, in that R2 to R3 growth stage. And once we get that full canopy closure at that time, it really sets us up for maximum yield potential. Another thing that we've noticed with our earlier planting dates is we tend to get more nodes per plant. And depending on the year, we tend to see anywhere from 2 to 3 extra nodes per plant. Now, this is where our free yield math comes into play. So let's say a farmer on a given field gets 2 to 3 extra nodes per plant, 3 pods per node. 3.3 seeds per pod. In some of these scenarios, specifically when we get into some of our late August rainfalls into early September, we get some really good seed fill period. That can equate up to, in some cases, up to 5 bushels per acre on free yield. And that's something we really strive to growers to think about this in order to look at ways to increase yield and really increase the return on investment for these earlier plantings. And again, I'd just like to reiterate, and it's because it's free, it didn't cost you anything. There's no additional input costs. You get up to extra 5 bushels per acre. And if we looked at our November 21 commodity board price at $12 a bushel, that's $60 per acre to your bottom line. And so generally when we're thinking about this and we're really trying to push this earlier planting date, I know in Wisconsin and other states, we're trying to ask growers, maybe think about if the soil is fit, go out there and start planting soybeans 7 to 10 days before you start putting corn in the ground. And that's kind of a general rule of thumb we have right now. And we're to kind of dig more into that with some more of this regional research collaboration that we have going on through our Science for Success team. Now, obviously, there's no such thing as a free lunch. All right, we have to understand all the risks. Generally, with our earlier plantings, we see increased disease pressure. A lot of this could be seedling diseases. One of the most common ones we see is an increase in sun death syndrome with our earlier plantings. And generally, that's just how we get that disease triangle to align. When earlier plantings, we see a significant rainfall patterns in that early vegetative stages. It stresses that plant, and that's generally when we see that infection occurring. We're also seeing in our earlier plantings, it may take somewhere between 15 and 25 days to get seed out of the ground. In those situations where we have a history of diseases, that's where some of these seed treatment options can come into place, not just for sun death syndrome, but for other soil-borne pathogens, specifically seedling diseases such as Phytophthora and Fusarium. But we've done enough research and we've worked with our collaborators on the plant disease side of things, and our earlier plantings always, not always, because nothing is 100%, but generally often benefit the outweighed risk. So again, even if you go in and plant early, you get some sun death in there, typically we still see increased yield over delaying our planting and not seeing any sun death syndrome symptomology. Now, in the northern part of the United States, we also see some risk from frost damage. But I think it's clear to note that we can see a pretty significant reduction in stand, and depending again where you are, each state has a different replant consideration, but generally stands, if you're planted early, from 50 to 70,000 plants per acre, can still yield in that 90 to 95% of maximum yield potential. And generally, we've done some research on this, you still get a full canopy. Now, it may take a week or 10 days later to get that full canopy. So what we're really trying to encourage farmers to do is make sure when you're managing these early plantings, you may have some lower stands, to layer in a residual herbicide to help control water hemp and other late emergent species, just to keep us going and that we control out there until we do get that full canopy. Now, one of the good things we've seen is some leadership from Dr. Vann and Dr. Lindsey is working closely with RMA, and RMA has reached out to most of the states across the country, and we're looking for changing our earlier planting date coverages. And again, you could see some significant variation from the number of days between the earliest replant coverage date and the median frost-free date within each state. You look at South Dakota, there's a 24-day difference. And you get down to North Carolina, there's a +9. So again, what we're really trying to do is push and work with RMA. And again, at the end of November, look for those new maps to come out. We've all seen kind of a sneak peek of those. And I think farmers across the country will generally be pleased with these updated maps. Again, one of the key planting date takeaways is check your crop insurance dates. Be flexible and do some experimenting. We're not suggesting that a farmer that hasn't really pushed their earlier planting dates to go out and push, plant 1,000 acres, just plant, half a field, half a section, try something, make sure your planner works out, and then just plan for a total management changes, because it does. When you plant earlier, depending on where you are in the country, there's Seeding rate decision changes, seed treatment decision changes, maturity group decision changes. So you're not just planting earlier and sticking with your status quo, which you've been doing for the last 10 years. So make sure you think about those things when you make those choices. So here's a QR code if you want to go back and look at some of our webinar that we recently did last year for their soybean planting considerations. Feel free to check this out and gather more information and dig into this topic a little bit deeper. One of the other outputs that we've done as the Science for Success team is develop these national extension outputs. And this is a really cool one. And this is probably my favorite one that we've done so far. It's a soybean growth cycle, important risks, management, and misconceptions. Because I think, I'm on Twitter and many of you are on Twitter. You see these crazy things that people spout on there. And what we've really tried to do is compile them and just go through and check these off and address each point. So again, before we dig into that too much further, we just want to remind farmers, go back to agronomy 101. How do we maximize yield at that VE or that emergent stage? First of all, stand establishment, a sufficient final plant population and uniform. And with soybean, it's relatively uniform. Again, we don't need a picket fence as they suggest on the corn side of things. So a relative uniform stand and emergence is really all that's required in the soybean side of things. Plant into a well-prepared seedbed. I think that's important, specifically when we're going back to talk about early planting. Just don't mud it in, don't have some compaction. Make sure you have a good seed bed, because if you go in and plant it poorly into a poor seed bed, you're going to be paying for that sin all growing season. As we were referring to earlier, plant at or around the optimal planting date for your region, and select an appropriate seeding rate just for your region, but based on when you plant and the disease pressures that are in your local area. So we always get this question specific when we're out there planting. We have these thin stands, and these replants are generally conducted at a later date, and we have a late penalty. Remember, depending on where you are in the country, you can have anywhere from a 0.2 to 0.5 bushel per acre per day yield penalty by delaying your planting date. So try to eliminate these factors that could lead to a replant with your initial planting. It's again back to agronomy 101. Make sure your planter is properly set up. Check it in each individual field. I know we tend to go and set up a planter in the first field, and the rain's coming and we get crazy busy. We just want to roll. Check it. Every field condition is a little different. Make sure your seeding depth is appropriate and you're getting good seed soil contact. Residue management is really critical also, given the extreme high yields of corn, and we're going in a corn soybean rotation. There is a lot of corn residue out there to be able to manage. Make sure you have your proper setup to manage that corn residue. Quality seed, that's one advantage we've had today. Just make sure you go out and buy good quality seed. That's not as big of a problem as it probably was 30 years ago, but it's again, every single year, there is a production challenge in a region where we have low germination and low seed quality. So make sure you account for that. And again, plant in good conditions and just be looking for that weather forecast, because we can have, imbibitional chilling on the soybean side, just as we do in corn. So be thinking about these things as we're going through the planting process. So these are just a couple examples of some of the misconceptions about that we've addressed. One would be the uniform emergence. One is the relationship between seed size and suboptimal stand. So again, just want to quickly go through these and point farmers and consultants into this area. And this is one that we really want to highlight. This whole misconception about a suboptimal stand is less than 80,000 plants per acre calls for an automatic replant. And I think there's enough data out there to support the fact that that is not true. The reality is you go out there, we take a visual stand assessment at the VE, we often underestimate, because we can see anywhere from a 7 to 10 variation in germination when we're just doing stand counts early in the season. So understanding we're often underestimating what that stand is out there. And also understand the cost of replanting plus the added penalty of later planting date can be considered, okay? Because even if you get a free replant, if you will, it's not truly free. So again, to dig more into this misconceptions about soybean growth stage, here's a webinar, here's a QR code. Feel free to click on that and dig more into this topic. So our next speaker is Dr. Laura Lindsey. She's going to focus in on a multi-state biological seed treatment trial. And what this is really leveraging the QSSB support that each of us have at a state level. Generally, we try to work together and develop collaborative research protocols that can be shared across state lines, and it gives us the power to be able to look at these different, be it biological seed treatments, be it sulfur, be it foliar nutrients, across multiple environments, and really help us assess and provide more information for growers. So with that, Dr. Laura Lindsey.
Thanks for the introduction, Shawn, and I'm happy to introduce this new trial. We have 1 year almost done. It's the fall right now, so data is just starting to trickle in now, but I'm excited to introduce this new study. So really, there's a big need for this type of research. There's a lot of biologicals on the market. I had my graduate student, Fabiano, look at all of the biologicals listed at Commodity Classic at their trade show this year. And he found 22 different companies with 40 different biological products for soybean only. And there's multiple active ingredients. There's Bradyrhizobia, Pseudomonas, Trichoderma bacillus. So this huge number. And it's really a lot for farmers to start to sort through. So really, we wanted to try to hone in on yield response to these various biological seed treatments. So this is a word cloud of everything on the label. So I looked at all these products at Commodity Classic, and you can see that they're just marketed for a variety of reasons. Some are nutrient efficiency, so better nitrogen fixation, maybe more phosphorus uptake, maybe more sulfur uptake, some disease potential issues there. Some are marketed for increased plant growth, better root growth, but there's just a lot of different aspects to these biological seed treatments. And also, just for my state alone, and I'm sure this would apply to other states as well, I'm getting a lot of questions. This was an email from a seed company, technical agronomist in Ohio, and he was really interested in what's the story with these biologicals. And it's a lot for their company just to sift through the data and having an unbiased results looking at biological seed treatment. So there really is a big need for this area of research right now. So this year, 2022, we had a biological seed treatment trial out in 17 different states, and you can see we have pretty good north to south, east to west representation. 17 states, and across those states, we had 60 different locations. So 60 individual field trials. So that's a really big data set. We're going to repeat this study in 2023, and we'll be adding more states. I believe we're adding Pennsylvania and Florida next year. So our trials will expand even greater next year. So one thing that we wanted to do with these, the treatment list for the biological seed treatment study was to get farmer input. So from Commodity Classic, we generated a list of products where we could survey our growers. So the Science for Success team sent this survey to soybean growers in their states to see what products they were most interested in. All right, so this is our seed treatment list for our 2022 biological seed treatment trial. And you can see we have 9 different seed treatments we're evaluating. And there's really a range of microorganisms. We wanted to be representative of what's out there on the market. And then also our 10th treatment is a non-treated control. And our non-treated control is just a standard fungicide and insecticide seed treatment. And then for our biological products, we apply those on top of that fungicide and insecticide seed treatment. Going back to that survey where we surveyed farmers on what they were most interested in, there was 4 products that rose to the surface. So those are the 4 products that are highlighted here that farmers identified as ones they were most interested in. So we are again looking at a lot of what I call as active ingredients, different types of microorganisms. One thing that our group did, the Science for Success team did, was I asked them to do a literature review for me to see, what do we know about these products? So it was really helpful for the team to help with that. And there are peer-reviewed publications on a lot of these, not necessarily products, but microorganisms. Here's just a few list of some of those benefits: early root growth, improved mineral uptake, water uptake, end fixation, greater sulfur availability. Some other ones might help increase phosphorus uptake, combat pathogens, and promote plant growth. And then also maybe some biological control against nematodes. But one real limitation of the previously published studies was most of them have looked at efficacy under laboratory, growth chamber, or greenhouse conditions. And those are really a good starting point, but for farmers, they really need to know how these microorganisms or these biological products perform in the field. So that's why we're doing this study, to kind of take this laboratory, growth chamber, greenhouse studies and then move them into the realm of the field. So our main research questions here are: which products increase yield in field conditions typical of US soybean production? And then, are certain products better positioned for certain regions, or soil types or production systems? If you look at the previous lit review that we did, some of these microorganisms work better in drought conditions or in dry soil. So one real big strength of this group is we have such diverse growing environments represented. Even within Ohio in 2022, we had one location where we had over 100 bushels per acre and plentiful rainfall in August. We have another location in Ohio where it was a drought and our average yield was about 40 bushels per acre. So you just within Ohio alone, we see different environments, and then you expand that out to the whole Science for Success team. And we really have a diverse growing condition. So hopefully be able to tease out some differences there where these biologicals perform maybe better or worse. And then really what's important to our farmers is return on investment. So we also want to see, is there a return? So do we increase yield, and then is there any return to that investment back to the farmer? So the results are coming soon. As I mentioned earlier, our yield data is just trickling in now as people harvest and get that yield data to us. We will have stand count information and yield data and management from all of those 60 trial locations. We are also analyzing soil samples for soybean cyst nematode to see what those populations were in our trials. And we've collected plant samples, leaf samples for nutrient analysis, and then also grain quality we'll be doing over the winter. So that would be primarily protein and oil. So make sure you keep following the Science for Success team as we get out our first year results, which will be sometime in winter of 2023. And I guess I also want to mention too, one real nice aspect of the Science for Success team is graduate student involvement. So this is my graduate student, Fabiano Colette, and he is managing the day-to-day activities of this project, which is awesome. And this study will be part of his PhD dissertation. So he's been handling the data analysis, the protocols, and communication with PIs, which has been really wonderful to have. And this is our Science for Success team this past year at Commodity Classic. Not everyone was there, but these are the people that were there this past year. And I just wanted to thank United Soybean Board for their support, and then also the state checkoff boards for funding the individual states to do this trial. So I will turn it back over to Rachel.
Fantastic. And thank you so much to Dr. Conley and Dr. Lindsey for highlighting various aspects of the project. So in conclusion, just to revisit, the overarching goal for the Science for Success team is to deliver soybean best management practices to US soybean farmers. And we do this through summarizing existing and ongoing QSSB supported soybean checkoff research. You heard from Dr. Conley on a couple examples of this where we've leveraged state level knowledge that we have for planting related production practices like planting date, row spacing, and seeding rate to make both local, regional, and national recommendations. We've also developed the soybean growth cycle publication that focuses on misconceptions and risks encountered at various soybean growth stages. We also heard from Dr. Lindsey on an example of national research trials, which are really a cornerstone of what the Science for Success team does, which is collaborate on national research trials. We heard about our biological seed treatment trial, which is ongoing. We also saw the example from the foliar fertilizer trial, which has been published and is information available right now. And we do all these activities, again, to really amplify our state level research and extension knowledge to have national extension impact. And the best part of the Science for Success team is that we have a very knowledgeable and dynamic group of individuals across the United States who collaborate together to reach our goals. And we'd like to conclude this presentation by showing a short video that highlights our Science for Success team. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, this is Giovanni Prezafontes, assistant professor and extension cropping system specialist at University of Illinois. I started this fall and been in this position for 3 days.
Hi, I'm Emma Matcham. I am a nutrient cycling agroecologist at the University of Florida, and I've been in my position for about 4 months.
Hi, I'm Daniela Carrillo. I'm the grain crop specialist at Penn State, and I've been in this position for 7 months.
Rose Francisco, Auburn University, grain crop specialist, 1 year.
Hi, I'm Mike Mulvaney. I am the Hartwig and Dowd Chair for Soybean Agronomy at Mississippi State University. I've been in that position for 1 year.
Hi, I'm Michael Plumbly. I'm corn and soybean extension agronomist at Clemson University, and I've been in this position for 2 years.
My name is David Mosley. I'm the soybean specialist at Louisiana State University, and I have been in this position for 3 years.
I'm Rachel Vann, NC State University soybean extension specialist, and I've been in the position for 5 years.
My name is Manny Singh. I'm the cropping systems agronomist at Michigan State University in East Lansing, and I have been in this position for almost 6 years now.
Hey, I'm Jonathan Kleinjohn, extension agronomist at South Dakota State University, and I've been in this position for 8 years.
I'm Laura Lindsey, and I'm the soybean and small grain agronomist at Ohio State, and I have 10 years of experience.
Hello, my name is Shawn Conley. I'm the state soybean specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I've been there for 15 years.
My name is Jeremy Ross. I'm the soybean extension agronomist at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture, and I've been the agronomist for 15 years.
Seth Nave, extension soybean agronomist at the University of Minnesota. I've been here for 24 years.
My name is Hans Kandel, extension agronomist at North Dakota State University. I have been an agronomist with soybean production for over 25 years.
I'm David Holzhauser. I've served as extension soybean agronomist with Virginia Tech now for over 25 years.
I'm Emerson Nafsager. Spent a long career at the University of Illinois working on crops extension. That was about 40 years ago I started, and I'm retired now but still active.